Will be recorded, as Emma said, for reference and uploaded to our COC website. Unless you're speaking, it's requested that all attendees please mute your microphones during the meeting so that everyone can hear the meeting effectively. Please type any questions you may have in the chat box, and we will answer as many as possible. All answers to the questions will be posted on our COC program NOFO website as well. And, welcome and introductions. Continuum of Care staff. We have Tanya Torno, our Deputy Director. We have myself, Marisol Alanis, Supervising Development Specialist. And you heard Emma speaking earlier. That's Emma Perez-Singh, our Development Manager. So in today's agenda, we're going to cover purpose and overview, funding available for services, eligibility requirements, population to be served, key HUD strategic goals, HUD homeless policy priorities, general application requirements, the 2024 HUD NOFO application timeline, a schedule of events, RFP scoring, HUD preference points, local bonus points, evaluation process, and questions as well. So for the purpose and overview, in response to the growing crisis of homelessness, HUD's CoCBuilds NOFO presents a crucial opportunity for communities to create much-needed permanent supportive housing. The NOFO is designed to fund the acquisition, construction, or rehabilitation of permanent supportive housing units, targeting individuals and families experiencing homelessness, particularly those with disabilities. The NOFO sets out 6 primary goals. It's to increase housing opportunities for people with high levels of need, expand the supply of permanent supportive housing units within the COC geographic area, enhance coordination between housing providers, healthcare organizations, and social service providers, prioritize resource access for projects in states with populations under 2.5 million as well, ensure permanent supportive housing units are located near essential services and reliable transportation, affirmatively further fair housing by addressing segregation and access barriers. These goals emphasize a holistic approach grounded in decades of research, showing that permanent supportive housing addresses both the immediate needs for shelter and the underlying factors contributing to homelessness. This will lead to better outcomes for individuals and communities alike. So funding available for services. The Riverside County Continuum of Care is eligible to apply for $7.5 million in funding, with an additional $2 million set aside for projects on tribal reservations or trust lands under HUD's CoCBuilds competition. Selected projects will be evaluated and ranked by the COC Board of Governance for inclusion in the county's CoCBuilds application. Only new permanent supportive housing units, including budgets for construction, acquisition, or rehabilitation, will be considered. Applicants can request up to 20% of the award for eligible programs, activities up to 10% for administrative costs. Late or ineligible applications will not be reviewed. And a note, the process is competitive with greater expectations from HUD for local review and prioritization of all projects. All proposals will be reviewed based on HUD thresholds of a minimum of 60 points, rating factors criteria, as well as project readiness. Given this, the applications must be complete, demonstrate strong project performance based on the specific guidelines of the RFP, and submitted by the deadline. See the eligibility requirements here on the screen. Applicants who fail to meet any of the requirements of the threshold eligibility requirements are deemed ineligible. Applications for ineligible applicants are not read or ranked and will not be read by HUD funding as well. For the populations to be served for permanent supportive housing projects must include individuals and families experiencing chronic homelessness or those eligible under dedicated plus projects. As defined by HUD's 2024 COC NOFO, these projects will dedicate 100% of the beds to these vulnerable groups, ensuring long-term housing stability and support for those with the greatest need. For key HUD strategic goals, focus on supporting underserved communities, increasing affordable housing, promoting home ownership, and advancing sustainable Equitable communities. The first goal emphasizes housing justice by supporting vulnerable populations and reducing homelessness through the housing first approach. It also promotes equitable community development, especially for communities of color. Goal 2 focuses on ensuring access to affordable housing by increasing housing supply and improving rental assistance. Goal 3 promotes sustainable homeownership and equitable access to credit, aiming to build wealth in underserved communities. Goal 4 highlights advancing sustainable communities by investing in climate resilience, environmental justice, and recognizing the link between housing and health. Applicants must align their proposals with these strategic goals to ensure compliance. HUD homeless policy priorities. The following are policy priorities specific to this funding opportunity. Prospective applicants are encouraged to consider incorporating the following policy priorities and program highlights into the proposals to strengthen the competitiveness of the application. Doing so will further strengthen the Riverside County's continuum of care, HUD CoCBuilds application, and maximize the competitiveness of each project application. For the general application requirements here on the screen, the program requires a 25% match on all grant funds, excluding leasing funds, as per 24 CFR 578.73. It's recommended to include a match for 30% due to potential increases in fair market rent. All project proposals must follow the housing first approach and participate in coordinated entry, aligning with Riverside County's coordinated entry system. Proposals should also coordinate with HUD's homeless policy priorities and include partnerships with housing and healthcare providers. Applicants are encouraged to reference the 2023 Homeless Point in Time Count Report and the Homeless Action Plan for a systems level approach. Lastly, all activities must be consistent with the 2024-2025 one-year action plan of the 2024 to 2029 Riverside County Consolidated Plan and occur within the specified geographic area. I'm going to hand it over to Emma to talk about our timelines.
Thank you, Marisol. So the RFP was released on September 16, 2024 on the COC website. I placed the link of that website in the chat for you to have access to. Today is the non-mandatory pre-bidders meeting. Any questions that are asked today will be included and posted to our website no later than Friday, September 27th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. Project proposal submission due date, can you please go back? Thank you. Is October 14th, 2024 by 1:30 p.m. And those will be submitted by email to the coc@rivco.org email. Next slide, please. All right, HUD CoCBuilds application process. Please go back to the next slide. The previous slide. Thank you. For those interested in applying for HUD CoCBuilds NOFO, understanding the application process and requirements is very important. Application materials, including instructions and packages, are available through our website. As I mentioned, the link is there. The RFP information is there. And also the NOFO is attached. We do encourage everyone to read through all of the documents thoroughly. It includes a lot of very important information that will help you in putting together your project application. COCs must review proposed applications locally and determine which to submit to HUD by the November 20th, 2024 deadline. Notably, COCs can submit a second application if the project is located on a tribal reservation or trust land, underscoring the importance of exploring opportunities to serve Native communities. It's critical in this process for applicants to engage with experienced development team members and familiarize themselves with the NOFO scoring criteria. You may find this information beginning on page 12 of our RFP and in attachment A, which is the HUD CoCBuilds NOFO, beginning on page 35. COCs must prioritize which application will be submitted on behalf of our community. Our COC will be using the NOFO's ranking system and process to initially evaluate proposals and has added a local scoring bonus to select the most competitive projects. The COC handles the initial review, ranking, and submission via grants.gov. If HUD selects our community for funding, the grant agreement will be established with the project applicant, who is anticipated in most cases to be the sponsor and or owner of the proposed development project. Next slide, please. RFP scoring. The NOFO emphasizes the importance of developer experience and capacity, urging communities to partner with seasoned developers and key stakeholders. A strong, diverse team, including developers, property managers, healthcare providers, and social service organizations, is critical to project success. Applicants should focus on building a well-rounded team to manage all aspects of the project, from construction to long-term sustainability. Each role, from developer to service partner, is vital for the success of the permanent supportive housing. Financing is another key factor to consider. HUD encourages leveraging NOFO funds with other sources like loans, tax credits, and equity investments to maximize the number of units created. This approach optimizes resources and increases unit production. And there has been additional bonus points that are available if you demonstrate being able to leverage specific funding sources. It also recommends converting existing buildings such as motels or residential care facilities into permanent supportive housing as a cost-effective alternative to new construction. Successful conversions seen in states like California and Vermont require an experienced architect and contractor to handle structural and code compliance challenges, so ensuring long-term project success. The scoring rubric is reflective of this. Next slide, please. There is this section is optional HUD preference points. You have an option to voluntarily address preference points policy initiatives in your application. Again, it is totally voluntary. This is not required to apply for or receive an award, but if you choose to do so, the information you submit will become a binding condition of the award you receive. One of the key initiatives is environmental justice, which aligns with Executive Orders 12898 and 14008. There is additional information about these preference points within the RFP and the NOFO. I would encourage you to read through that if you would like to be considered for those additional preference points. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have set local bonus points. The COC has opted to add additional local bonus points that meet these specific criteria as listed on the slide. This is going to give a competitive advantage in the selection process. The CoCBuilds funding is highly competitive, which means that our COC must identify the most competitive projects to move forward in our application. Next slide, please. Before you list the evaluation process, it is not entirely prescriptive. The county does reserve the right to split or make awards that are most advantageous to the county. All evaluation materials will be considered confidential and not released by the county. Next slide, please. All right, we are at the question period. If you would like to ask a question, please feel free to write it in the chat, and we will be monitoring the chat and asking you to unmute. Okay, first question, does the funding trigger prevailing wage? you will be required to confer with an attorney to determine whether or not the project triggers prevailing wage. And Juan, are you on the call? I think that you are more qualified to speak
Yeah,
on
I'm on
that.
the call.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Does the funding trigger prevailing wage? These are federal HUD funds.
Yeah, so the funding is going to trigger David's making wages. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay, next question. What level of service and case management are you expecting from third-party services? I mean, that really is going to, I think, depend on your project. Because it is a PSH project, you are required to include supportive services. The NOFO is very clear that competitive projects must include this element as part of their application. So whether you are going to be providing it directly or partnering with another agency to provide it, that should be a part of the application. PSH is serving individuals with disabilities. And so, you will need to explain that and how those services are going to be provided as part of your application package. And then another question, do the funds work for at risk of homeless definition, or does it have to be chronically homeless? You know what? I believe it has to be chronically homeless, but we can go back and look at the regulations in the RFP. So we will go ahead and answer that question definitively as part of our posted frequently asked questions. Please explain which types of financing is prioritized. There is a scoring rubric in the RFP, which details which types of funding, leveraged funds HUD is considering in order for you to get full points. I'm trying to see if I can look it up here. I'm going to share my screen very quickly. Can all of you see my screen here? So there is a list of examples. Could be low income tax credit, home, CDBG, section 108, section 202, and section 811. But this isn't an exhaustive list, it's just examples. So if there are additional funds that are being leveraged, make sure that you highlight that as part of your application. And I'm hoping that I answered the question correctly. Leibach, if you would like to unmute yourself, let me know if your question was related to something else.
Kind of. This is what I had in mind until during the presentation, it was kind of explained differently. So I wondered why the discrepancy was there. During the presentation, I think you were talking about taking out a loan and how certain loans were, prioritized, or certain, other financing methods, not just leveraging financial resources in general, specifically, these types that come from, I guess, other governmental funds, but just in general, like bonds and loans and stuff like that.
So, I mean, if applying for competitive funding and you haven't secured the funding, I mean, you can include that in your application, but that's going to be weighed in when we review, because as you're aware, if you're applying for low-income housing tax credits, it's competitive funding, and but if you're able to demonstrate a competitive tiebreaker, I mean, we'll account for all that when evaluating this section.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, does Riverside provide funding for permanent supportive housing? I'm not sure. Ellie, can you elaborate on your question?
Sure. I think you mentioned that there needs to be the supportive housing in place. So is that something that's going to need to be paid for by the developer?
So the simple answer is yes. However, the county does issue NOFAs throughout the year, including the COC for funding available potentially for these services, but we wouldn't be able to make a long-term commitment.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
And then Jared, it looks like you had a question. Do the funds work? Oh, okay, sorry. As a follow-up to the question, where will those answers to the frequently asked questions be posted? They will be posted to our Continuum of Care website. I did include the link in the chat. It's at the top of the chat. It's going to be in the same place where you can find the RFP.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and Cassandra, hello. My question is, will we receive a copy of the slides? Yes, they will also be posted in the same place the RFP is posted. The recording along with the slides. Oh, thank you, Marisol. She just posted it in the chat again. All right, are there any other questions that you would like us to answer? You're welcome, Cassandra. I'm going to give it just another minute or so. If there are other questions that come up after the webinar is over, you can feel free to send them to the coc@rivco.org. Again, you have, Tasha, can you go back to the timeline slide, please? There we go. So the last day to submit questions will be September 23rd, and we will have those posted to the website by September 27th. And all applications are due by October 14th. I will give it one last chance. Oh, okay, one more question. Is there a requirement to be a nonprofit to apply? No, that is not a requirement. You're welcome. So I will give it just one more minute. I know we had, I think someone just joined. If you have any questions that you would like to present during the webinar, we are available to answer them now. Otherwise, again, please feel free to send your questions to coc@rivco.org. And we will be posting the FAQs by the 27th on our website. Does THP housing count for this application?
What is a THP?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Transitional housing program for foster youth?
No, this is for this is only for PSH.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, well, I'd like to thank everyone for coming to our non-mandatory meeting. Again, if you have additional questions, please feel free to email coc@rivco.org. We will be posting those questions by the 27th. You will find the questions along with the RFP, the recording of this webinar, and the slides at our COC website. Link is in the chat. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.